Welcome to the Mythic Keep. In the late summer of 2012, heavy excavators broke through the rain-slicked tarmac of a municipal car park in Leicester. Beneath layers of modern debris and Victorian brickwork, archaeologists uncovered a shallow grave. Inside lay the skeleton of a male in his early 30s. His spine curved sharply to the right. The bones carried the marks of extreme violence. Forensic analysis cataloged 11 distinct battle injuries, including 9 concentrated directly on the skull. This man had been hacked down in close combat. This family tree traces the mitochondrial DNA extracted from the skeleton's teeth, matching it against a living descendant of the dead man's sister. The statistical probability of a match was 99.999%. They had found King Richard III, and by pulling his physical body out of the dirt, they fractured a 500-year-old historical consensus. For half a millennium, the culture knew exactly who Richard III was. He was the withered-armed, limping hunchback who murdered his own nephews to steal the crown, a villain cemented by William Shakespeare. Yet that enduring portrait traces back to a very specific text written around 1513, nearly 30 years after Richard was killed. The author was Sir Thomas More. He was a rising political operative working under the regime that had defeated Richard. More's manuscript was designed to please the newly established Tudor dynasty. To legitimize their grip on the throne, they needed the king they had overthrown to look as irredeemable as possible. The version of Richard III taught in schools and staged in theaters was never an objective record. It was a highly successful political smear campaign engineered by the victors. The 2012 exhumation gave historians their first chance to test the Tudor claims against physical reality on a laboratory table. This medical visualization compares a standard spine, a severe hunchback, and the actual skeleton. The bones proved he was not a hunchback. Medical scans diagnosed him with idiopathic adolescent scoliosis, a sideways curvature of the spine that develops after age 10. In life, this meant his torso was slightly shorter, and his right shoulder sat a bit higher than his left. Outfitted in tailored medieval clothing and custom plate armor, the condition was easily concealed. His political rivals took this minor physical asymmetry and weaponized it. They inflated a medical condition into outward proof of a malevolent soul. If the Tudors fabricated a physical monster, they successfully buried the reality of how Richard governed. During his 2-year reign, Richard called a single parliament. It sat for just 27 days in January of 1484. In that short window, he pushed through a series of striking legal reforms. He empowered justices to grant bail and barred officials from seizing property before a guilty verdict. He also restructured the jury system. By requiring strict property-owning thresholds, the new laws made it harder for wealthy elites to bribe courts. Then he broke entirely with tradition. Richard mandated that all new statutes from this parliament be written and published in English, rather than the customary French or Latin. For the first time, ordinary citizens could read and comprehend the laws that govern their lives. The policies actively insulated the poor from corrupt officials. But those progressive policies sit alongside an undeniable, brutal reality. During his watch, his 2 young nephews, the princes in the tower, vanished behind these stone walls. While rival factions certainly had motives of their own, Richard had legally invalidated the boys' claim to the throne to secure his own position. He remains the prime suspect in their disappearance. The physical ghoul was an invention. The real man was far more complex, a progressive legal reformer who is still shadowed by the ruthless, unsolved mechanics of medieval power. His erasure was secured by violence. In late summer 1485, the Tudor dynasty claimed Richard's crown in the mud and blood of Bosworth Field. Taking the throne by force created an immediate political problem. To justify the usurpation, the new regime needed Richard to be so abhorrent that his death felt less like treason and more like divine deliverance. King Henry VII was the primary beneficiary. He was the architect who required this new villainous narrative to legitimize his tenuous grip on power. A century later, William Shakespeare adapted that state-sponsored propaganda for the stage. The poetry made the smear immortal, completely overwriting the reality of the 1484 Parliament. We spent 500 years certain of a fiction. The culture embraced the myth of the monster and buried the history of the lawmaker. Both versions lived on in the public imagination, but only one was permitted as truth until the earth finally gave up his bones. Like and subscribe to help keep these stories alive. Of legendary tactics and hidden histories, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Mythic Keep.